turn your camera off if you'd rather not appear in the recording. That's absolutely fine. So I'll just share the PowerPoint. Okay, can you see that okay?
I can see that.
Fab, great. Okay, so this training, we are looking at to what extent are pupils with SEN capable of bullying, because bullying in a special needs environment can be quite a complex idea, and people get very passionate about it and very emotive when we talk about bullying and what constitutes bullying. So we're going to just have a look at how we approach bullying as a school. So just a little bit about me. My name is Hannah. I have a background, I was behaviour lead here at Severndale for several years, and I've got a master's degree in educational innovation with a specialism in SEN. And as part of that master's degree, I actually, for my dissertation, conducted a case study on bullying here at Severndale. So I really looked into what bullying looks like here at Severndale and how we address it. So according to the Department for Education, DfE, their official definition of bullying is it is behaviour that is repeated. It's intended to hurt someone either physically or emotionally, and it's often aimed at certain groups, for example, because of race, religion, gender, sexual orientation, etc. So this is the definition that we use as our basis for how we identify and tackle bullying here at school. So what is bullying? There is a real lack of government guidance for special schools. Everything the DfE has produced, and they have produced a lot of literature on bullying, it all makes an assumption that the pupil with special needs is always the victim and never the perpetrator, which obviously in a school like this, where all of our pupils have special needs, that poses a bit of a problem. Are we saying that in a special school you can't possibly have bullying because pupils with special needs can't act as bullies and can't display bullying behaviour? So that's what we're really going to look at in this training. There's no legal definition of bullying according to the law. However, some forms of bullying are illegal and schools have an obligation to report these to the police. So an example of that would be, for example, a hate crime aimed at someone's sexual orientation, race, disability, etc. The Anti-Bullying Alliance, although the Department for Education doesn't seem to acknowledge that pupils with special needs can be perpetrators of bullying behaviour, the Anti-Bullying Alliance does recognise this, and they say that disabled children and those with SEN are 3 times more likely to be bullied and to bully others than their mainstream counterparts. So they do recognise it sort of comes as a cycle, and pupils with SEN are much more vulnerable to this, which is why it seems a bit crazy that the DfE doesn't acknowledge that fact at all. So bullying at Severndale, what does that look like? This came out of the case study, which was a study right across the whole school from early years all the way up to futures. And the case study was built using the data that we have from school, so where incident reports are filled in and bullying is actually recorded, and also a questionnaire on teachers' views, because teachers are the voices of experience and they're witnessing this in the classroom every day. And the outcomes of that were that physical bullying is the most common form to occur at Severndale, and verbal bullying is much less likely to occur. That could be due to communication difficulties. Secondary age pupils are more likely to display bullying behaviour than other age groups. It was more likely to happen amongst our sort of 11 to 16 cohort. And MLD pupils, so that's our most able pupils, are the most likely to display bullying behaviour than other abilities. And I think that probably comes down to cognitive ability, and that, going back to the Department for Education's definition, that intent to cause harm to others. And we will touch on that again in a minute. So the impact of bullying, what impact does bullying behaviour have? The emotional and physical well-being of the victim. The victim is more likely to display challenging behaviours themselves from the Anti-Bullying Alliance. So again, as I said before, it sort of comes as a cycle. Those who experience being bullied are more likely to pass it on down the chain and to go on to bully others. It creates barriers to learning, because if they are not in a state of good well-being, if their emotional and physical well-being is at risk or at harm, they're not going to engage with their learning very well, and difficulty forming friendships with others. So pupils who are bullied find it difficult to develop those friendships. So staff perceptions of bullying. It's a very highly emotive topic. People get very passionate about it, about pupils being labelled a bully and about the victims of bullying experiencing that sort of repeated targeting, that repeated ongoing behaviour directed towards them. Opinions about bullying in relation to SEN vary greatly. So you do encounter people who think that if a pupil has special needs, they can't possibly be capable of bullying another pupil, and you get other people who think, yes, they are just as capable as their mainstream counterparts, and they can display that bullying behaviour, that sort of repeated intention to cause harm towards their peers. The case study did find that pupils are less likely to target lower ability or more vulnerable pupils, and they're much more likely to be verbally and physically aggressive towards pupils of a similar ability and or staff members. So it's really important that as a staff body, we have a united approach to bullying, because opinions can vary so greatly. And that's why, as a school, we do have an anti-bullying policy in place. So how can we identify bullying? So the big thing is the cognitive issue, their cognitive ability. For it to be defined as bullying, the intention has to be there to hurt the victim. So it could be that you have a pupil who is quite low ability and they are repeatedly targeting another student again and again and again. But it could be that the intention is not to cause harm. It could be they like the noise that pupil makes, or it could be they're just trying to get some physical contact, some interaction. It could be a communication thing, in which case we wouldn't identify it as bullying behaviour. However, saying that, we do have to take the victim's needs into consideration. If that targeted pupil feels victimised, then we treat it as a bullying incident. So behaviour can be classified as bullying behaviour without the aggressor being a bully, if that makes sense, because just because they don't know that they're causing that distress, they don't understand that they're causing harm, their behaviour is still causing harm. So we have to treat it as a bullying incident. This has actually happened very, very recently in my own class. I've got two pupils. One is quite high ability and one is quite low ability. And the low ability pupil has been repeatedly targeting the high ability pupil. So she will approach him and she'll take his glasses off his face, or she'll scratch him, or she'll push him. We are treating it as a bullying incident. We are recording it as bullying. However, her intention is not to cause harm. She is trying to communicate with him and she wants to form a friendship with him. She just doesn't understand how to do that, and she doesn't know an appropriate way to do that. So because it is harmful behaviour, we are recording it as bullying and we are treating it as bullying, and we are treating the victim of that behaviour as if he is being bullied, but she is not a bully because she doesn't have the mental capacity to know and to want to cause harm to her victim. I hope that makes sense. Okay, so Bloom's taxonomy, it's how it's sort of, it represents the building blocks of education and how cognitive ability develops. It was brought about in the 1950s. I think it was 1956, but it's still really, really relevant and it is still widely used. So the point of this is we think about where on this pyramid, where on this scale our bully, our pupil displaying bullying behaviour, our aggressor, we think about where they are on this scale, and really for it to be categorised as bullying, they've got to fall into sort of the top part of the pyramid. They've got to have that cognitive ability to understand the consequences of their actions. So, how do we address this bullying behaviour? So the Department for Education's guidance says school staff proactively gather intelligence about issues between pupils which might provoke conflict and develop strategies to prevent bullying occurring in the first place. So there's an overarching preventative approach to bullying, rather than waiting until it happens and trying to put measures in place to stop it. We take the attitude that we want to stop it happening in the first place. All the information we have about our different pupils, we've got strategies in place to make sure that one pupil doesn't target another pupil. We ensure all staff are familiar with the Academy's anti-bullying policy, and we log behaviour on Iris or My Concern. So those are two pieces of software that we use for recording information and collecting data. We log behaviour on Iris and My Concern, so it's evidenced and repetition patterns and causes can be identified, so we can work out what's going on here. Why is this repeated behaviour happening again and again and again and again? It's really important we keep both sets of parents informed, the parents of the victim of the behaviour and the parents of the aggressor, because if it was your child, obviously it's really important that you know what's going on and you can support them at home, and we let them know what strategies we're putting in place to support them at school. And we have a pastoral support team, and we can request pastoral support if necessary. So these are some of the strategies that we do use to address bullying behaviour. Communication aids are available because it could be that the aggressor is wanting to communicate, and if they've got their communication aid, that problem is solved and they can communicate without resorting to this harmful behaviour. Staff modelling and interaction, ensuring needs are being interpreted so pupils do not have to resort to negative behaviour. So for example, particularly with I'm going to use an example of a lower ability child. If they are repeatedly throwing a ball at their friend's head, the way we would tackle that would be the staff member would model how to throw the ball and catch the ball appropriately without it becoming negative. Class rules in place about how we treat our friends, how we treat each other. Role play situations in PSHE sessions. We quite often look at these kind of relationships and social interactions and how to behave appropriately. Discussion and reflection, look at what's happened, what could we do better next time. Minimal interaction with aggressor. So again, using the example of the pupil in my class, we staggered break times so that they were only together during sort of the highly structured lesson time, but the more free flow time where perhaps there isn't as much adult supervision, they weren't on the playground at the same time, so there were less opportunities for the aggressor to target the victim. So parents and staff work together to interpret behaviour and whether it is bullying. It's worth saying that harmful incidents, it could be there's a one-off event that occurs, that doesn't automatically make the behaviour bullying. We would treat that as an isolated incident. Going back to that Department for Education definition, it's if the behaviour is repeated and the intention is to cause harm, that's when we would identify it as bullying. It's quite tricky because it's not black and white, it's a very grey area, and it does rely a lot on staff and parent judgment to make the call sort of whether this is ticking all of the boxes to be identified as bullying. Parents to be kept updated about any incidents which may occur, and that's both sets of parents, the aggressor's parents and the victim's parents. If you have any concerns, speak to your child's class team in the first instance. That communication is really important because obviously we're here to support our young people and we want to help them to behave appropriately, and if there are any problems we want to get to the bottom of them and nip it in the bud before it escalates. So back to that Department for Education definition. For behaviour to be defined as bullying, it has to be repeated. It has to be intended to hurt someone, either physically or emotionally, and often aimed at certain groups. For example, because of race, religion, gender, sexual orientation. There are others as well. That's just an example. So I've thrown quite a lot of information at you and talked non-stop for about 20 minutes. Have you got any questions or anything you kind of want to discuss?
Yeah, so it's like for those children with the difficulties, sometimes they just like, you know, like probably they act it as a bullying, but probably it's not because they don't understand and they don't know, isn't it? Like maybe the intention is not to, you know, to really hurt the someone. And for example, like my son, I noticed that it's not about bullying, but let's say that someone fell down or, you know, oh, someone poorly, and then he just laughing.